I've take two. I've got with me a guy who's a musician. I don't know if he's a musician, but he's a magician. He's also been a game show host, an actor, and his name is Larry Anderson. Larry, thank you for joining us today.
You bet. Who am I talking to here, Josh?
You're talking to Josh Jacobs.
Okay, so this is for your own personal thing? Or are we going to broadcast this on anything, or is this just your own memorabilia here we're doing?
Well, a little bit of both. I work for News Talk 590 KTIE in the Inland Empire, and so if my boss says, we can broadcast some of these things, it would be great to. If not, then I'm hoping to podcast it maybe over the World Wide Web.
Wow, that's great. Well, hello to anybody listening out there. And I have to ask you, the event just ended right now. Did you have as good a time as I did?
This was great. I've grew up loving game shows, and in fact, when I was a little kid, I used to put my suit on when the game shows would come on, and I'd watch Concentration with Jack Nars, Name That Tune with Tom Kenny, Let's Make a Deal with Monty Hall, and then, of course, Joker's Wild with Jack Barry and Gene Rayburn on Match Game, and, of course, Dennis James of the Nighttime Price is Right quite often, as well as Bob Barker on the daytime as well. So Steve Beverly said last year would be an afternoon we'd never forget. This year was also an afternoon we'll never forget. What about you?
Well, for me, having hosted a few shows, I was so humbled by the company that we were keeping in that room today with Jack Nars, Tom Kennedy, Monty Hall, and of course all the other great celebrities, Pat Carroll, Shelley Berman, and talk about the great monologues that they all did. I mean, Shelley Berman killed the place. If all you people listening could have heard just 10 minutes of Shelley Berman's speech, you'd want to have a CD copy of it to play for all your friends. It was truly a great event, and a well-deserved honorarium, if that's such a word, a tribute better to these great gentlemen whom I am still in awe of. I feel like I'm in their shadow, just hoping I can do 1/10 the job they did whenever I get a shot to host a show.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself growing up and how that led to your being a magician as well as hosting game shows and doing acting.
All right, I'll give you the short version. A Midwest boy from Minnesota, and took up magic as a hobby. And with magic, I decided to come west and see if I could seek fame and fortune. And shortly after I got to California from Minnesota, I was 21. I found myself in the studio system here teaching actors how to do magic whenever they had to play a magician on TV. And I was fortunate to teach Bill Bixby how to do magic on a show back in the early 70s called The Magician. And he inspired me to become an actor. He said, Larry, you should, you're a young guy, you should take up acting. So I said, wow, really, Bill? And he says, yeah, I'm directing something, I'll give you a part. So right away that started my acting career. But I, of course, had been a magician, a young performer for many years prior to that. So I had the experience as a performer. And then with a career in sitcoms, with my magic background, I got a show with Lucille Ball called Life with Lucy. It was an Aaron Spelling show. And as a result of that show, I got a shot on The Tonight Show. And that Tonight Show sort of changed my life and spun in a new direction because, I had about 8 magic minutes with Johnny Carson on television, and watching at home was Ralph Edwards, who was trying to find a host for the new version of Truth or Consequences. This is about the late 80s.
I remember that.
Yeah. And he saw me and, doing my magic and kibitzing with Johnny and Ed McMahon, and he said, that's the guy that should be hosting Truth or Consequences. So I suddenly was thrust back on the stage, and as a not an actor, but as a performer, like my magic days, standing up there doing tricks and whatnot. But this time they were the gags and the stunts that you do. And if those people listening remember Truth or Consequences, it was a stunt show. It was always setting up somebody for some crazy stunt that they didn't know was coming their way. So that began my hosting career. And since then, Game Show Network, I did a show, and then The Big Spin, which is the California Lottery show. Some people might remember that. I did 2 years of that show, which was a great fun show, because our contestants there were not screened for likability or charm. It was whoever happened to have a winning lottery ticket, and many of them didn't speak English, and so it was a real challenge as a game show host, for that show. But what a delight, because you truly changed lives as a host on that show. I mean, somebody who'd been working in the fields all his life was suddenly spinning a wheel and hoping that his family would be living in the lap of luxury, from being a farm worker, and many times that happened. I remember some of the tears that were shed on that stage in The Big Spin. So it's been a great experience being a host.
Well, I remember when you first hosted Truth or Consequences. I remember Life with Lucy. I just can't remember all the names on the credits. And in fact, the little boy, I forget what his name was, but he looked just like a boy down the street in my neighborhood. He used to drive me crazy, but it wasn't the same guy. I used to make jokes it was, but that was the first time I ever got to see Truth or Consequences, because Bob Barker was also always mentioning on The Price is Right. I was like, was Truth or Consequences a pricing game that was retired? And then when I found out what it was, in fact, you taught me a magic trick on that show as far as identifying what crayon I have in my hand. Because what you'd done was you took the crayon, but then you used your thumbnail to gouge a little bit of it, so that way you knew what the color of the crayon was they put in your hand and stuff. I tried that magic trick one time at a Halloween party, but unfortunately they knew that I was looking at my finger because I wasn't sleight of hand enough.
Yes, for those who actually want to try the trick Josh is describing, it's supposedly a mentalism trick. So you have somebody hand you you give them a bunch of color crayons and you say, take these and I'm going to turn my back, and you put one in my hand as you're holding your hand behind your back, and so they take one and they put it in your hand, and as Josh described, you scrape a little bit of that wax onto your fingernail. And then you let them take the crayon back from you, and then you bring your hands out in front of you and wave them mystically in front of your face. Try to channel the mystics out there. Meanwhile, you're trying to glimpse a little bit of the fingertip, the wax underneath your fingernail, and see whether it was brown or blue. But sometimes you couldn't tell if it was black or blue. So you say, well, it's I'm seeing a color of sky. It's deep dark blue, and they go, no. And you say, I meant brown is what I meant. I knew it started with B. But yeah, it's a great trick.
Tell us about the projects you're involved in right now.
Well, right now I'm actually working a lot in the infomercial industry. One of the things I learned as a struggling actor was you sometimes needed to find work between jobs, and I always was very good at sales. So I used to work in the fairs and the carnivals and that, selling vegetable slicers and ginsu knives and everything like that as a pitchman. So when the infomercials became so popular, it was a natural transition from standing there at a fair up on a soapbox selling a ginsu knife to doing it in front of millions of people. So a few infomercial companies took a chance on me, and I learned the whole infomercial business as a host, but I'm now producing them. In fact, I'm getting ready to shoot a new one next week with Jeff Conaway as our host, from Taxi, and he played Kaneki in Grease, and it's a nostalgic look back at some of the old films that we saw in school, the old, you remember the driver's training films and the sex ed films, and the old civil defense films for you old enough that grew up in the 50s or 60s, duck and cover and hide under your desk when there's a nuclear attack. Anyway, we've taken all those films, put them on a DVD package, and Jeff, of course, with his nostalgic links with Grease and Taxi, he's going to be a perfect host for us. So we're going to see if people are enticed to buy some of these old, crazy, badly acted black and white films that we saw in grade school. So we're going to put that out in November.
Well, you got a customer for me, probably, since I love those nostalgic things. Mind if I ask you about the Knight Rider pilot, since you appeared as Michael Long in that? How was it appearing in that thing? What was going through your mind? Did you think this show would be a hit, or were you not really too sure what exactly it was?
It's a really funny thing, because that show was in production and was almost done shooting, and apparently, I'm trying to remember who the producer was. It was not Glenn Larson. I couldn't think of his name. Glenn Larson looked at all the film that they had shot, and he said, we need an opening for this. It's not quite right the way it is. So they said, we need to cast someone who's similar to David to come in, and will establish that he gets shot, and they have to do this plastic surgery and turn him into David Hasselhoff. Well, so I was just an actor that they cast. They needed a guy about his height, and I'd done some TV work. So the casting director said, "Oh, Larry would be right for this. Let's bring him in. We'll read him." So I just went in. For me, it was just a one-day gig, and nobody knew. I mean, it's just like many of the shows that were being done. You put them on the air, and if they stick, they stick. If they don't, like most of them, you never see them again. So it was just another show. It was one-day work for me. Went and shot my scene. I had no idea that this thing would be the huge hit that it became. And, of course, so I was the first Michael. Was it Michael Long or Michael Knight? I thought it was Michael Knight. Yeah. Michael Long, okay. Anyway, so I was the first Michael Long. And when the show was such a hit, well, actually, when they released the pilot, it stood to reason, since I had gotten plastic surgery and became David Hasselhoff, that I would have the same voice. So I had to have David Hasselhoff's voice. So, of course, they dubbed all of my lines, so it was David. And when I heard that, of course, stands to reason, but I said, don't give me a credit on this. I don't want my, that's not my acting. That's his voice. So just, I'll remain anonymous, but it's funny how people come up to me and say, you're the original Michael Long, weren't you? Yes, that was me.
Well, if it's any consolation to you, the lady who played Tanya in the DVD first season, David Hasselhoff mentions that her voice was also dubbed as well.
Really? Well, I don't want to speculate why her voice was dubbed. For me, they had to. But maybe she just, I won't even say. I assume she turned in a good performance, but who knows? Yeah, I remember her, yeah.
What's your advice to those who want to get started in acting?
In acting? Well, let's see. Really, of course, you can act anywhere. You can do community theater, you can live anywhere, but if you want to do it professionally, you need to be where it's happening. So if you're somebody that really wants to start a career, you've got to put yourself where it's going on. You literally, like me, I was in Minnesota and I knew I wanted a career in show business. I just decided I'm going west, Mom, and that's a very important thing. So I came out here, and then it's once you're in either New York or LA, one of the hubs, then it's you get in theater, you get in acting classes. It's all public relations. It's marketing. It's get known, get out there, get seen. So you start doing anything you can to get seen and promoting yourself. And part of that is, of course, you get your pictures and your shot and all of that, and start knocking on doors to agents. But you got to have the training. So as any good actor they should find a good acting class, find some good teachers. You can't do better than to get in a comedy improv workshop, like the Groundlings or Second City, because that just really tests your mettle and gets you thinking creatively. And even if you don't have a funny bone in your body, it's still very valuable to be in those workshops, because it's thinking spur of the moment and creating scenes and really challenging your intellect and your courage, because acting is about being courageous. You got to get up there and you got to bare your soul and not be self-conscious, and all that comes, it's like a muscle. You have to exercise that muscle, and that's where it comes acting classes and comedy workshops or whatever it is. So train, and then learn how to market. Get in, there's so many talented people that aren't making it out here because they just don't know how to market themselves. So, promote.
Well, Larry, thank you for being with us.
You bet, Josh. And I'd like to say hello to everybody on what station if this gets on the air?
News Talk 870 KRLA.
KRLA? Oh, I know KRLA. Yeah, well, great. Hello to everybody out there. And thank you for having me, Josh.
And that was from the Game Show Congress Convention in 2005. Larry Anderson, one of the nicest celebrities I've ever met. And got to see him again in 2006 and 2007. Remember running into him once or twice during auditions when I used to go out for TV commercials. Always very friendly. And in 2006, his girlfriend, now wife, Mandy McMillian, came along to the Game Show Convention, as well as in 2007, which is when the photo was taken of the three of us. And just like Larry, Mandy's an actor as well. But the ironic thing is that Mandy is a musician. So I gave the title musician to the wrong spouse. Now, about a year and a half after the game show convention, my mom and I were at the Sizzler in Eagle Rock, and we saw somebody there, and I thought, she looks familiar. And then so I went up to her, I said, Mandy? She said, yeah. And so the three of us had lunch together that afternoon, and I hope that Larry and Mandy are doing well.